following program is an exclusive Disruption Networks production.
So you just bought your dream home, and now it's time to move. Let's face it, nobody likes to move. All the packing, unpacking, lifting, upstairs, downstairs, and broken everything, including your back. Let the professionals at EJA Moving Company take all the stress and pain out of your move. Competitively priced moving, relocation services, office moves, and complete packing and unpacking services. They work with everybody to make it simple and easy for you to move and relocate. Call EJA Moving Company at 315-335-0516. When it's time to relocate, have EJA Moving do all the work for you. Hit them up online, ejamoving.com.
Want to know what's going on at the D? Hit up DisruptionNetwork.net and check out our events calendar. Find out about upcoming guests, special events, concerts, show schedules, community activities, and more. Get connected at DisruptionNetwork.net.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me here again for another episode of the Unstoppable You podcast with me, your host, Heather Beebe. We are in season 2, episode 6 tonight. I guess virtually is a great place to be connecting as a lot of us are on a lockdown. We'll get a little more into that in a little bit here. But first of all, I wanted to mention a couple of things before we start. Beards for Bella has been postponed until further notice. They do not have a date picked for that at all, so I don't really know much more to share about that, but it is postponed. It's kind of annoying because Sean has been growing his beard out all winter long for this, and it's gross. So I'm looking forward to when that will be gone. And then June 6th, I wanted to share, I have added a really, really interesting event locally. I host my retreats in Puerto Rico. Many of you have asked about doing something local. Now is your chance that you can take advantage of an experience with me. June 6th, it's going to be a wilderness/equine therapy retreat. So we're going to be on a horse farm in Taberg, New York. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I went there the other day just to scope it out and immediately knew that this was going to be a new spot for me. So check the information out right on my webpage, or not my webpage, actually. It's not on my webpage. It's on my social media pages. So you can see about that. So I would be remiss not to mention the coronavirus that's going around, the COVID-19. It's literally halting business as we know it all over the United States. But more of our concern right here in the Mohawk Valley, businesses are really going to start feeling the hit economically here. I know in our house, as self-employed people, we are feeling it like many others here in the Mohawk Valley. So I wanted to talk a little bit about having the mindset to kind of embrace for this and what's actually the reality that we can't control it. So it is scary. I think it's scary because we don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anyone out there right now has experienced something like this. I did see Puerto Rico go through this for about 9 months after Hurricane Maria, where they just lost access to everything. But here we are in a state where we haven't had such of a storm, but we're having this, lockdown for people, the social pause per se. And the reality is that we cannot change that. We are doing this to help stop the spread of this virus as it is highly contagious, and we are losing business because of it. So as we see that hit, what can we do? And, identify your current reality, what's actually happening. If you have more free time, think of things that you can be focusing on versus crying about what you're losing, because the reality is that's not going to change what's happening. So how can we adjust and go with the flow of things as they change? So, kind of identify what you can do to make your comeback more powerful than ever. If you're a self-employed person, how can you revamp things? How can you add a new segment into your business? How can you still create or whatever it is that you do? So if this is financially devastating to you, remember that you can always pick up the phone and call different institutions where, for example, if your mortgage is going to be late, you can call your bank and try to negotiate with them. So this is not an end all. Keep the faith that this will pass. This is temporary, and take care of the things that you can control. You can be proactive and pick up the phone and renegotiate due dates and things like that with anybody that you owe money to. So keep that in mind. Most importantly, you are not alone. There are many, many, many people in this position, and we will see over the course of the next couple of months, probably a lot of the changes happen because of this. So embrace the people that are in business for themselves, while also taking care of yourself. I also wanted to touch a little bit on the virus itself. I'm not a doctor, nor do I work in the hospitals or anywhere where they're seeing this, cases of this and stuff. But I can say that we have to pay attention to what the experts are saying. Not all people in positions of power are experts. So pay attention to who you're paying attention to and where they're getting their information. I think that's really important. I see a lot of fake articles shared, stuff that's outdated. The title says one thing, but the article says something completely different, but nobody opens the links. Please don't share information on social media unless you know that it's true. A lot of the hysteria out there, I think the general public is responsible for. I know it's scary. I know we do not know, so therefore we're not sure, and we share things that immediately we can relate with. It's not always relatable just because we know what the title says. So make sure you're reading what you're sharing. And remember, not all people in authority are people who are experts in what's happening right now. So, and some of the basic steps, washing your hands and stop touching your face. The place where this virus wants to be is inside your lungs. So if you're touching your face and putting your hand closer to the destination that this virus wants to be at, you are a vessel of it getting there. So stop touching your face and keep your hands clean. And please, for the love of God, antibacterial is not something that kills a virus. So the hand sanitizer is not enough. Please wash your hands. So, and in general, for your healthy adults that have a choice, take care of yourself throughout the year. So you have an immune system that can handle something like this. Eat healthy, sleep, get as much fresh air as possible. And of course, the most important thing, which I don't think is being talked about enough right now, is stop abusing antibiotics. Don't let your kids abuse them, and you don't abuse them, because then you are, these super bugs are, I don't think, going to go away anytime soon. So anyhow, that leads me to our guest tonight, who, as we all know her as the executive director of the Greater Utica Chamber, we have agreed to Skype her in. I think it's the best option, and you will understand fully why that's so important for her and her family. And it's just coincidence that this is the topic of tonight, is to hear her story about her son. So I have here Meghan McGrogan. Hey, Meghan.
Hi, everybody.
So, and you might also know her, from her time at the brewery. I feel like that's when I first started to know Meghan. And then her podcast here every other Wednesday at 1:00, right? Level Up.
Yep. Had to take a little bit of a hiatus with that too, with everything going on. It just seems like it's been a little crazy start to the year.
Yeah, and I think the last title of Meghan, I think it's probably not the first time you've heard this, but it won't be the last. You're also Peter's mom.
Yes, yep.
And
Peter's mom. Yep.
Yeah, and him being the most important reason why Meghan has decided to hunker down, take a little pause as necessary, because that is something she can control, to avoid bringing this into her home.
Yes, yep. I think that's, it's kind of one of the things. I mean, obviously we are so, just to, I guess, back up, Ryan and I, we've been a little worried watching the news about this, but I think, towards the end of last week, we really started paying attention. I really started, the U.S. Chamber actually is a great resource for us. We're a member of their chamber, we're accredited by them. So we've been really paying attention to the news that they've been providing. And it really kind of took a turn, I feel like, last Wednesday. We really started getting very concerned about this. And we made the decision Friday morning, or I made the decision for the girls in the office, that we were going to take every measure possible to move our operations remotely, because we can't have events. It actually was pretty easy for us. So we moved everything remotely, and then Ryan owns his own business, and we feel both very fortunate that we do have the ability to work from home. I know a lot are struggling with that, especially with today's recent news. A lot are going to be struggling with that. So we're very fortunate that we were able to do that, and we made that decision Friday. So as of Friday at 7:30, we have hunkered down and social distanced, and Peter has a little bit of a cold right now too, so we really want to take every precaution we could.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about Peter for a little bit. And basically, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because you aren't alone in this, in your experience, in your story, which has nothing to do with the coronavirus. Yeah. And I think it's very hard to think or imagine what you went through for me as a mother. But the reality is that women go through this, parents go through this, like the women go through it, but the babies go through it, the fathers go through it, the families go through it, the medical professionals go through it, as parents themselves having to care for these little tiny babies. Let's talk about that to just shine some light on the reality and also the inspiration.
Yeah. I think if it's okay, I guess I'll start from the beginning. I think people know that, or I shouldn't say everybody knows, but a lot of people know that Ryan and I had a premature baby, our son Peter, who's doing very well, by the way. So kind of backtrack to when I found out I was pregnant. We were obviously, as most new parents are, very excited. It was our first child. So we started going to appointments, and early on, probably even in the first 6 weeks, I started having a couple of minor issues. Most issues like this resolve on their own, no problem whatsoever. But we found out pretty early on after that we had some cause for concern with Peter. Some genetic testing had come back pretty unfavorable. It kind of became a repeated thing. It became a usual thing that we'd have a test, something happened. We didn't get great news. So I was monitored really closely. And ultimately, basically, he was diagnosed with something called intrauterine growth restriction, and there's not really a cause for it. At least there wasn't a cause they could point to specifically for what had happened. I mean, there was a lot of contributing factors. He had a 2-vessel cord, for instance, 2-vessel umbilical cord, most are 3. I had some infarctions on my placenta and ended up having a pretty big blood clot at the base where the umbilical cord went in. So that definitely contributed to things. But I also ended up getting diagnosed with really early onset preeclampsia. And that's ultimately what put Peter and myself in a lot of danger. And it's something that they figured could happen. Just because of a lot of times when there's intrauterine growth restriction, preeclampsia can be a factor. So they started monitoring me early and ended up putting me on bed rest at Krause. So I was there for a month. So our joke around the house the past couple of days has been, this is just like bed rest at Krause, except for the whole country's doing it with me. And we have the luxuries of our home, and I can drink a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And we can go outside if we want. So we're trying to make light of it. So, when you fast forward to when he was born, basically, and we were told, by the way, every day in the hospital, and I think this is encouraging for a lot of moms to hear, especially if you've, had any type of complication or hardship in your pregnancy. We got bad news on the reg. Like, every single appointment, there was something. I mean, very few times did I go in, they started doing, if moms are watching, or even dads watching, or anybody who's had a baby, they do something called a stress test, where they put that big band, on your belly. I'm sure you're having a lot right now, Heather. So they put it on your belly, and they listen for the heart rate, and then, they monitor, they have a little, that's where that little sheet comes out. You see in the movies where they're like, oh, are you having contractions? What's happening here? Well, they started doing that when Peter wasn't even a pound. And so I'm sure you can imagine it would take forever to find the heartbeat. And then, inevitably people would panic, and they'd come in and say, oh, we can't find the heartbeat, and what are we going to do? But, he was so little, that was pretty common. So, that would happen every appointment.
Yeah, you say it's common though, but it's for someone who doesn't have children, your first pregnancy, it had to be really scary.
It was scary, but we also didn't know what to expect. Like, that's kind of one of the blessings of this whole thing, is we hadn't had another child. So like, we didn't know it wasn't normal to have an ultrasound like every other week, or, we didn't know it wasn't normal to do these tests that early. So they would just, now I know, being out of it a little bit, that the medical professionals are just doing their job, and they really they need to tell you these things. They need to prepare you. Nothing prepared me for bed rest. Nothing prepared me for, having an emergency C-section or having a baby in the NICU. But, now that we're on the other side of it, I think it's encouraging for people to know that we never got good news, even up until he was born in the NICU. It was every day was a blessing, and every day you'd hear something different, and every day you'd get a million different opinions, and, sorting through all that and trying to stay positive. I mean, it was really tough, but that was one thing we were not willing to negotiate on, which was being positive, and knowing that God had a plan for Peter, and he is just the strongest, he's so full of zest and so full of life. I mean, everybody who has seen him or had an opportunity to meet him, it's unreal, the things that he endured, and, the obstacles that we had. He was in the NICU for 109 days. So,
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah, I saw him last year at a chamber event, just running like a madman outside. Yeah, it's so cute. I've actually seen him in public too with, I think he was with your aunt. And I was like, oh, this is really weird, but is that Peter? She's like, who are you? It's like,
Little kid.
I know, because he's so cute. You know, if you're friends with, on social media, then you know. So, but yeah, super, super adorable little boy. So, yeah, so, I mean, let's talk about your experience with the NICU. I know it's not easy, and not every baby makes it out of there. And I just can't even imagine, I guess, being the one that does, And
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, just like, let's talk about that a little bit, like your experience with, I don't know if you can even remember, or even kind of bring yourself even back into that. You don't have to if you don't want to, but the surrealness of all that, and but also like the amazing technology that's out there for a baby. Oh, let's also clarify, Peter was 1 pound 11 ounces.
Yep, he was 1 pound 11 ounces. He was 12 inches long, and he was born at 31 weeks. So that's really, really small. If you had a baby or a nurse or followed these things, I mean, that's very small. And that was one of the problems. He just wasn't growing properly. And really, in some ways, I mean, he really was doing better outside, if that makes any sense. And that's kind of one of the things they tell you that you're just not prepared to hear either. You're like, well, what does that even mean? He's going to do better on the outside. But, sometimes your body just doesn't agree with being pregnant. And that was me. And the other thing I forgot to mention too. So it's kind of funny, these things like this scenario right now, where we're talking about social distancing, and we're talking about, isolation and all this stuff. I mean, I was leading like a really, of course our appointments were really tough, and, we would get really down. We'd leave an appointment, and then, we'd say, no, stay positive. Like, we have to move on. And so other than like having some negative appointments from time to time, I was leading a really normal pregnant life. Like, I felt great. When they told me that I had to go to the hospital, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was running around doing normal things. I had no symptoms of being preeclamptic, wasn't swollen, wasn't dizzy, all these things, just nothing was crossing my mind. Like, you have to be now put in a hospital bed like today and never move until the baby comes, was like, what? So if I can do it, everybody can do it. So, have your glass of wine, enjoy your modern luxuries at home. It's going to be fine. Little bit of humor there on these things, but I lost track a little bit. But we were talking about the NICU, and so how big he was. So yeah, so he was really tiny, and so when we started going through the whole process, fortunately we were in great hands at Kraus. What happened when we got there, and the next day we were there, they said, okay, would you like to take a tour of the NICU, because more likely than not your baby is going to end up there. So we ended up going to Kraus, into the NICU, and we saw everything going on there. And just to kind of put it into perspective for you guys, so at the time when they're at maximum capacity, they're at about 58 beds. And when I say beds, I mean the little incubators that you see, see them on TV. You probably saw pictures of me posting Peter in them. And literally imagine like, a doorway in a room. You're like, everybody's kind of that far apart. Like, it's not, you're very close together. There's no privacy. There is no patient confidentiality. Everybody knows everything that's going on. And I think I had shared with you, Heather, one time when we were out, sometimes it isn't even the, what Peter went through that I have like post-traumatic stress over. I mean, it's really what I saw other people go through too, because like you said at the beginning, not every family has the outcome that we had. And we 100%, probably 200% know that and know how blessed we are. Not every family ended up in that scenario. Not every baby ended up in that scenario. But Peter, he, from the beginning, he beat all odds. I mean, everything they said, he could have Down syndrome. He had a 1 in 6 chance of having Down syndrome. They thought he had triploidy at one point, which is like an extra copy of every chromosome. There's so many things that they told us, right up until the day he was born. He could have this, he could have that. There's so many issues. He's probably going to be learning disabled. He's probably not going to walk. There's a chance that he couldn't speak. I mean, there's so many things that they said. And it's just, I think even some of the nurses don't believe it that care for him, that know his scenario now. Some actually are probably watching right now. So I don't know how much you want me to get into, like, the experience of the NICU. I mean, I'm happy to talk about any of that.
Yeah, share it. It's whatever you feel like sharing, without.
Sure. So, it's kind of one of those places, and Ryan and I will often describe it as, it's the scariest place, but the most comforting place on earth. And that's the best way to describe it. Like, sometimes I even have like, I'm kind of like depressed that I don't get to go there. I know this probably sounds like really, really strange because, like, obviously you want your kid home like as quickly as possible, but there's just like an eerie comfort about it that, these people know what they're doing. And if I'm being honest, I mean, prior to this scenario, I really didn't have a lot of trust in doctors. Like it's a lot to put trust in. I really had no choice at that point. Like, there was nothing I could do while I was on bed rest. There was nothing I could do while he was born. There was nothing I can do. I remember the doctor came in to say, we have to get the baby out like now, like in the next like 20 minutes. And my mom was like freaking out. She happened to be there. It was just kind of like an odd scenario that she happened to be there. And they were like, we have to get the baby out. And I was like, okay. I mean, it's just, everybody's like, how are you so calm about this? I mean, it's just, you have to leave all of your trust to them.
Yeah.
So, that part's really tough. That's probably the hardest part because you physically and mentally cannot stay there. I mean, you can't be there 24 hours a day. And there's just something so unnatural about having a baby. And I mean, I didn't even get to meet Peter for, I think it was 28 hours. I was on what they call a mag drip to control my blood pressure. And they don't let you see the baby. I mean, you're kind of delirious. Like, I was completely out of it. My whole family had seen him before I did. The only thing I remember when they wheeled him out of the OR was his little nose was, they wrap him in all these blankets and it's almost like a plastic. It's kind of weird. And the only thing I could see was his nose because they had him, intubated. And it was just the most bizarre thing that's all I saw. And again, like I said, I didn't get to meet him. So I had him at 1:17 in the morning. And I think it was about 3:30 the next morning in the middle of the night, they were like, okay, we're taking you off of the medication and we can wheel you up to see him right now. And I just remember being like, what? It's like 3:30 in the morning. It was just so overwhelming and not what you picture the first time meeting your child to be,
Yeah.
But the nurses and the doctors and how, I mean, they operate like, it's like clockwork. I mean, any NICU mom will tell you, I mean, they come in, they give their report, everybody's on the same page. I mean, you have a team of doctors and nurses that are like your baby's team and they only have like a couple other babies and they come in and it's so routine to them and they're touching these little babies and with no, it's like an everyday thing. Like you and I would brush your teeth. They're, running IVs and taking their temperature and changing their diaper and, intubating them and taking blood. I mean, it's just, it's wild. So that sense of like, they've got this. I always had that mentality about it. They made it very easy for you to walk away. I mean, of course, it got to the point where we were really frustrated and we just wanted him to come home, but you can't push for that either. Like you really have to, they have to be ready. And I think that was the hardest part, honestly. Like, not being in control of that and not knowing when it was going to happen. That's really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when could you hold him? Like how much time did you have to wait?
Let's see. It was a little over a week. So the way things happen at Krause, at least, and I think most NICUs are the same. And just to clarify, St. Luke's is also amazing, but he didn't end up at St. Luke's until he was exactly 2 months old when he got transferred, which is also a cool story. So my Aunt Kathy was a NICU nurse for, I'm going to get this wrong, I think 38 years, 36 maybe. She's going to yell at me.
Long time.
It
was a long time.
She was a NICU nurse. She started at Strong Memorial in Rochester, and she was at St. Luke's for many years. And she actually frequently did transports from Krause to St. Luke's. And she was retiring. He was supposed to be born on October 8th. So she was retiring in mid-October. And so Peter was her last transport that she did. She actually was able to come to Krause. And another odd scenario, like the ambulance driver was one of our cousins, like just happened to be that day.
Yeah.
So she did the transfer from Krause. So St. Luke's is amazing. I don't want to discount them. It's just Krause was where we were most of the time. So when he was born, he was in nursery A. So it goes from acute is in A all the way down to, I believe it goes to F. So like F is the closest to the door. So like the closest on your way out, I mean.
Okay, yeah, like so, to health.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You're doing really well. If you're in F, you're probably getting ready to go home. So when he was in nursery A, that's like the really, touch and go place. You don't want to be there, but the best of the best are there. The best nurses, the best doctors, the best everyone. Mm-hmm. So we were there for he was there for a little under 2 months. A little under 1 month in nursery A. And so we got to hold him. It was a little bit over a week, I want to say. And it's just so crazy. Like, they're hooked up to all this stuff. It's not like you're holding a baby. I mean, there's tubes and wires, and they do something called kangaroo care, which actually they're encouraging most parents to do, mothers and fathers, or any caregiver really. So, you put the baby inside your shirt and then you put your shirt over. So it's like skin to skin contact, which is especially important in the NICU because you're not really getting to hold your baby often. And you really can only hold them, for little amounts of times. I mean, like enough time to read a book, and sometimes, I mean, honestly, it was really scary. Like, you'd be holding him and he'd start desatting, meaning like his oxygen levels would drop and, they'd have to get a bag out sometimes and, help him breathe. And, it's just like, wow. It's just so strange to think about now, I mean, and it got to a point, honestly, where I was afraid to hold him a couple of times because I was traumatized of like, okay, I would associate like holding him with him not being able to breathe and like having that not be like a safe space for him because he was coming out of the incubator. So it was a really like hard balance of knowing like what exactly to do, and how to be a mom really. I mean, it's, sometimes I think I still struggle with that. By the time he came home, we were so used to, it sounds kind of bizarre, but like we were so used to leaving him there. You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it. Like it's like it's a hard attachment phase, I think, through all that.
Yeah. Well, then you were in charge and you had to rely on your own instincts and, to like keep this kid alive without the help of all these medical teams.
Yeah. And devices really, I mean, right. Like we're so used to him being hooked up to everything. I just remember, and he really did get spoiled at St. Luke's a lot. Not that he didn't at Krause, but, my aunt and all of her friends, I mean, a lot of them are on Facebook and maybe they'll watch this, but You know, they all were just so great. And I remember Barb Kitchen, one of his nurses, had bought a rock and play for Peter because he had been there so long. And,
Yeah.
you know, it was just like, you know, this kid's got to like live some sort of like normal life. So she bought him a rock and play, and he was just like so cozy and comfortable. And then we get home and Dr. Henderson's like, just so you know, the baby can't sleep in the rock and play. And we're like, what? Like, he's been in the rock and play in the NICU.
Yeah.
I mean, he was hooked up to all these life-saving measures, so it was like okay. But it wasn't okay when we got home. So we're like, well, how's he gonna sleep now? So that was an adjustment. But things like that, you know, you're so used to knowing their oxygen, you're so used to knowing the respiratory rate. You know, I found myself like, you know, looking at a watch, counting his you know, respirations for, I mean, God, sometimes I still do it. If, you know, like he has a cold right now. I did it the other day.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You
how
feel
has that been as a parent for both of you guys, just to know, like, to be able to walk away when he's sound asleep at night and trust that everything is okay, and you also can lay your head down and completely let go and rest yourself? Like, how has that been for you guys, both of you?
definitely took a while. I mean, honestly, I mean, you can ask Brian like every night. I mean, I still go in and I still like listen for him to, you know, breathing. I mean, I think that's natural for most, you know, most parents
Yeah.
to do that.
Poke
But
them, like, do they move?
you know, it was definitely tough. Yeah, and you know, he came home November 20th too. And if you remember, that was to let's see, 2 flu seasons ago. I mean, it was like one of the worst we had in a while.
Mhm.
And I just remember thinking, how are we going to get through this? I mean, it was right before Thanksgiving, right before Christmas. You know, as you know, from my job, like I was around people a lot. You know, it's really tough. You know, so this whole other side of what's going on right now, you know, this kind of social distancing. I mean, that was our norm. We didn't go anywhere. You know, we would go out, I mean, for an occasional dinner, you know, whatever, for a little while. I mean, thankfully our family is so amazing. You know, they've always been amazing, and watch them so we can get out. And, you know, that's one of the other big takeaways from all this too, is, you know, Ryan and I really understand how important it is to have a strong relationship, because, you know, going through something like this when you don't could really be a make or break scenario. And so that's one of the things that we've continued to try to do, you know, when he came home, is to, you know, go up, make sure we go out, make sure we have, you know, dinners together, make sure we go on overnights every once in a while, because we recognize that we really need to be strong. And that's how we got through it the first time.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, for sure. So when was Ryan able to get more? I guess, I don't know. Maybe he could be the same as you in the beginning, as far as spending time with the baby. How was that experience for him, getting to get close with the baby and bond
yeah.
time? You know.
Well, he in the very beginning actually got to spend a lot more time with him than me, because, you know, I was in pretty rough shape, you know, with my C-section and everything, and it wasn't a typical surgery either, you know, so it was pretty tough recovery for me. You know, I've never had a C-section before, so I'm sure it's not great for everybody. So,
Yeah.
but he got to spend a lot of time with him in the beginning, and they really, really do a great job of encouraging, you know, mothers and fathers to get very involved in the NICU. And really, we were really blessed too, because back then, I mean, they allowed other family members, as long as they went in with one of us, they could go in. Now, you know, it actually started while he was there, and they've continued that now only parents can go in. So we really encouraged really our whole family to go in and see what was going on. And I think it helped them to understand what we were going through. You know, so Ryan really was able to care for him and hold him and everything too. And he was so great. I mean, talk about just a crazy scenario to be in. And, you know, it's just amazing just watching your partner really go through something like that too, and seeing how they react and respond. And, you know, they had a special relationship from the beginning, I would say, and you know, and still do. So he jumped right in.
Yeah. It's cute. Actually, when Peter came to that, it was the barbecue event
Yep.
last fall. I think I don't even remember when it was, but when he arrived with Peter, and Peter was like, and he was like super dad. It was so cute. He was like carrying the bike up the hill there behind the Twin Ponds. But yeah. So do you ever look at him and just wonder, like, just how amazing, how lucky, why him? kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do all the time. You know, and I don't know how many people know this either, but you know, I lost my dad when I was 8. We lost him to brain cancer. He battled for about 8 months with several brain tumors, really. And so that's who Peter is named after. Actually, my dad was Peter. And in some weird way, I have a lot of guardian angels, I guess. I don't know. It just is, he's a miracle. I mean, he really is. I mean, if I could tell you the things that we heard, like I said in the beginning, you know, just a lot of, you know, I mean, it's almost like people wanted to remind us constantly that, like, this is probably not going to work out for you. And it's really odd how they say it. I mean, I did kick a couple people out of a few rooms during the whole scenario, but you know, he's just a miracle child. I mean, he really is. He has defied what everybody has said. I mean, even as a toddler, I mean, you know, there have been times where he's a great, Dr. Henderson is his pediatrician. He's a great doctor. He's the best. But, you know, we've had conversations with him, and it's almost like he hears us say something and he's like, listen, I'll show you. We were worried about him speaking. Like the next week, he's like talking up a storm. I mean, we worry about him walking, and the next week he's like walking up storm. I mean, he really just, you know, I think kids are so resilient. Like, it's amazing how resilient they can be. And, you know, we're walking on eggshells all the time, and then he just like pulls it out of his hat, like, oh, you want me to do this? Why don't you just say so? You know, I can do this. You know, the same thing, he was the same way in the NICU. Like, I remember forever we were like, God, I mean, he won't eat. You know, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. You know, I remember it was like a major victory that he drank 10 mLs of milk. I mean, you know how little that is because you have kids, but you know, anybody who pumps or pays attention to milk or breast milk or anything, I mean, that was like 10 mLs. I mean, I don't even know what to equate that to. It's so small, you know, and he just, every time we wanted him to do something, you know, he would take his time, but then all of a sudden it just would click. And they say that about preemies all the time. I mean, they just, all of a sudden they click.
Yeah. Aw, so cute. You know, my original reason to, again, going back to just raising awareness and sharing your story, but also the March of Dimes is going on, getting ready to host their event, I think in early April. You guys are the 2020 ambassador family for the Mohawk Valley March of Dimes, which is really cool. So congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you.
To be the story. I think you guys are a great little family to use as an example at the face of that. So that's why the timing of this worked out perfect because of the event, you know, and that's why I wanted to ask you around this time. So, but I think it's also, I'd like you to touch on the importance of social distancing for your family and why it matters, because I don't think people, for whatever reasons, they want to take this into politics, they want to take whatever, the reality is that this is a very dangerous virus, and social distancing is something they're doing to try to help not only people like Peter, but also to lower the amount of people to not overwhelm the healthcare system. So in case somebody like Peter was to be sick, that they can handle it and help him through it in the full way that they know how, and not be shortaged, you know, have a shortage of equipment or respirators or whatever it takes, you know. So if you would like to share a little bit about what your thoughts are on social distancing because of people like Peter and why it matters to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you know, and I think, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is, you know, of course, we're dealing with coronavirus now. The flu goes on every season. And, you know, I think it's also something, I mean, the amount of anxiety and panic that people are feeling right now, I mean, that happens to us. Like the first case of the flu we hear, I mean, we're in like overdrive already. You know, obviously his first season home, like I mentioned earlier, we did social distance ourselves on purpose then. And by that, I don't mean not going out, period. I mean, you know, for most of the time, I mean, our daily routine, and everybody will tell you, I mean, I was a lunatic. I had like signs posted on the outside of the door, you know, do not come in, you know, if you've been around other people who are sick, if you have a cough, sniffle, runny nose, et cetera, you know, but our normal routine was to walk in the house, wipe down cell phones, wipe down water bottles, change our clothes immediately, wash our hands immediately. I mean, that just was normal for us. You know, that first flu season he was home. And then, we've slowly kind of tried to dial it back a little bit. I think there is a little bit of an element to building some sort of immunity. I mean, we can't keep them in a bubble forever. But when it comes to something like this, where it's so unknown, and everybody's reacting to this so differently, I mean, they are, knock on wood, saying that kids aren't, super affected by this, but I certainly don't want to find out if that's the case. Just to paint a picture for you this week, we don't even know how he got a cold, but somehow he got exposed. I mean, nobody's really been around him that's been sick, but it could have been something on our clothes. It could have been a mild, something that like you or I would just say, oh, that's weird. I just had to blow my nose once, maybe it's allergies or something. He goes into like a downward spiral. Like so he's on a breathing treatment as a precautionary thing throughout flu season anyway. He gets that every day, but right now we've had to times that by 3. So now he's getting 4 breathing treatments a day just for really like a stuffy nose. But his airway, he has, it's called chronic lung disease, and a lot of preemies end up with this because of the oxygen therapy. So he was on oxygen for so long and, on CPAP and, all these other things that controlled his breathing. It ends up creating like scar tissue in their lungs, and they get like sticky, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, it just sends their immune system into overdrive. So you kind of understand why when people are saying, you have to be very careful because people are immune compromised. And, some people don't even know what immune compromise means. And what that means is they have an underlying health condition. And you're seeing all these people who, just on the news earlier, they had, somebody died. I think the first person that died in New York State had emphysema. That's what they mean by immune compromise. I mean, to you or I, we can walk away without a problem, but we're carrying it to somebody and it's very easily passed. I mean, that's how babies get RSV. People think, oh, like I have a little cough, it's like not an inconvenience for you. But the reality is you're carrying it on your clothes. It can live on your clothes. It can live on surfaces. So that's why it's the same exact thing that happens with RSV and the flu. People don't realize they're carrying it to everybody, but it happens so quickly. And with this particular virus, it's happening like spreading like wildfire. So that's why we really made the decision. Quite frankly, Ryan and I would probably be fine. Peter might even be fine. I don't want to find out, and I don't want to find out that my mom wouldn't be fine, or my grandma, or my aunt. I mean, all who have medical conditions. That's why this is important. And I think, it's not really that hard. I mean, my heart breaks for the people who, are losing their jobs over this. Today, ask, Angela and Joanne, we have spent the entire day researching every single member that was affected, the restaurants, the bars, the theaters, the gyms, and we're going to be coming out with a communication tomorrow that's going to just promote how all of them are handling in this. How do you place orders with them? How can you patronize them? That's what we're coming out with tomorrow. And we worked our butts off today to get that all pulled together. My heart breaks for people that are going to be really taking a hit on this. And honestly, it's probably going to be, most of us are going to take a hit on this.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so important. I mean, the quicker we all do it, the quicker it's going to go away. I mean, that's at least my feeling on it. I mean, the quicker everybody just hunkers down. Of course, it's a pain in the butt, but listen, at least we have modern technology. You can watch some shows on Netflix, play with your kids. You can go outside. At least it's this time of year. I mean, if there's a little bit of a silver lining, it's not the middle of, December where we're stuck inside in the snow. But that's kind of my thought on it. I know everybody has so many opinions on this, but coming from someone who, I can't imagine what the scenario would be if we had to bring Peter to a hospital right now and the other things that he could be exposed to, not just coronavirus. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, even if he had a little bit of a breathing issue, and even if it wasn't coronavirus, he could end up in the hospital and end up getting the flu and dying from that. I mean, that's how serious it can be. And that these are the type of people that will die from this, or people that have underlying health conditions. And that's who you have to think about. I mean, that's number one.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take the opportunity right now to mention that you are not a superhero just because you can be sick and work at the same time. Like, people don't really care. You're not really going to get an award or a guarantee into an afterlife or whatever you think you're getting or gaining by going to work sick. And I think this is a huge wake-up call for our country in regards to paid time off and things like that, because I understand, you're kind of stuck in a situation like, I can't afford my bills, I can't afford my life if I don't go to work, so I have to go to work sick. And it's unfortunate that we are really pushed into that kind of corner. But this is the danger. It's not so much about you. It's not about you. It's about people like Peter and other people with compromised immune systems who, don't stand a chance against this little cough that you have, that you're a superhero to work through, but you've now brought it into, his zone or his family's,
And I think some people, might think I'm harsh sometimes. I mean, I got pretty crappy with somebody who walked into our business after hours a couple of weeks ago because I knew they were sick. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Oh, well, I needed to get out. Well, no, you didn't. Because now you're in a bar of, we were at Pizza Boys. Shane was a great host, by the way. But we're in Pizza Boys. There's food out everywhere. You're shaking everybody's hands. I mean, and that's why, we made the call before we were forced to stop having our events. That's the whole premise of them, right? Is to meet people and shake people's hands and network. And, and I'll be honest with you, I was one of those people. I was easily one of those people before I had Peter, before I had a reason to pay attention. I was one of those people. I would go to work, hell or high water. I very rarely called in sick. You can ask Fred and Matt. I was not the type of person that would call in sick. I was one of those people that had to at least show up to prove it. I would be like, oh, well, I'll just get there. And if I don't feel good, at least they'll know that I put in the best effort. Listen, it is not worth it. I mean, your boss will, and if you have a boss that's not understanding, I can't understand that because I'm to the point where, and the girls will tell you, I am extremely understanding, but sometimes it takes a scenario. Like I was not that person before, but it takes a scenario like this to have you understand that it's not all about you and it's not all about, the boss. It's not, these things can affect people in ways that you just don't know because you've never had to deal with it. But when you see, literally like these babies in this NICU, like their airways are smaller than like a swiggle stick, like that you put in a drink. Think about what that means to have overload. Like, think about what it feels like if you ever like gotten a gulp of water in a pool and like you're drowning, like you don't even know what to do. That's fear. That's how people live with these conditions. And it's just not worth it. You're not a hero. Trust me. And again, I think we've even talked about the flu shot thing before. I was somebody who never got a flu shot too, because I always had this mentality, oh, I've never had the flu, I don't need to get a flu shot. Well, and again, that's a whole nother topic for another day, but it's not always about you. And that's what it's hard to put yourself in shoes that you've never been in before. I get that, but that's why we share and talk about things like this, because people need to understand that, the impact can be far greater than you even can imagine. And, how would you feel if something like that happened? How would you feel if, my son was exposed to something like that and we're having a conversation weeks from now that isn't such a great, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think if there's any employers here tonight watching this as well, I hope you also take into consideration the importance of offering your employees the option to not come in when they're not feeling well. Maybe this is a time that you can actually start to practice and learn the ways and the technologies out there to encourage your staff when they're not feeling well to keep themselves separate from everyone else. You can think about just even in an office building, if one person is sick and then all of a sudden 5 people are sick, the productivity and the decrease in productivity that you're going to experience. So be realistic. I think this is a good time to explore the options out there to encourage people to stay home if they're sick. I think the bottom line for any of the flu seasons that we deal with or any illnesses in general is that when people are sick, they just need to stay home because these viruses especially, and bacterial things, they spread from person to person through contact. They're not like, things that are crawling outside of the house, crawling into your house from the street. That's not how it works. So it's individuals contacting with individuals. So, if anything.
I think, even with the chamber, earlier in the week, we had shared, like I mentioned earlier, that the U.S. Chamber was putting out guidelines. And, again, we were paying attention to those and we shared some of those with our members on Friday. It's a great time to look at your operations. Other things happen all the time. I mean, look at the weather and look at, sometimes employees will just say, well, screw it, I'm not going to work today. I'll just call in. I mean, imagine if you had a scenario set up. I mean, of course, people start abusing it and then it becomes an issue, but really it's all about accountability. If you have a trust system in place and you have an accountability system in place and everybody understands that, like, listen, this is what we need to get done today. Honestly, I think Angela and Joanne will tell you that today they probably worked harder than they worked all last week. And we're all home and it was really easy to do. Bhandar Tech is our IT provider. I reached out to them last week. They very easily set us up. I mean, in less than a day, I feel like we were able to, move all of our files remote. We were able to, set up, an employee that didn't have a laptop with a laptop. Our phones are all, I mean, literally, if you contacted our office right now, you would have no clue we weren't there.
Yeah.
Like I said, the big thing for us is the events, and that's probably the biggest hit that we're going to take because a lot of the value that we provide is in networking. So we're going to have to think of creative ways to do that. I mean, it's just, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we live in this age that's so digital anyway. It shouldn't be that hard, for people, again, completely sympathize with people who just can't make that work. I mean, there certainly are industries that cannot make that work. But there's a lot that can, and it doesn't really take that much if you just, everything is, I'll go back to the book I'm reading, Marie Forleo. It's a very good read so far, but everything is figure outable. Like, you can figure anything out if you just take a step back, digest it, and ask for help. That's why we're a great community resource. I mean, there's a lot of, I was talking with Z earlier just about the show and, things that we can do in the meantime. There's a lot that's at our fingertips with technology. It just seems crazy that, more people can't, just roll up their sleeves. It's not the norm, but maybe it will be. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, you see those memes going on Facebook about how we're going to discover at this point how many of those meetings we have that could be a phone call instead, And not saying that, we can't take everything, I wouldn't want to disconnect more than I think the world is disconnected. But at times when people are ill and you're looking to help the general public, because this is a public health issue, this isn't political, this isn't anything else, this is literally just a public health issue. There's times when we have to be able to be flexible.
Well,
for
and
the
like
greater good.
Cuomo said, yesterday, and at first I was like, ooh, that was a little harsh, but I mean, he said we should be acting like we are in a war state. I mean, we really are in a state of war. That's how people need to be treating this, and there's a couple other memes out there, which, I have to kind of appreciate, our parents and grandparents. I mean, they had no choice. They literally had to go to war. We're asking to sit on our couch for, a month. That's, it almost seems like a luxury.
Yeah.
Not something that we should be, so up in arms about. I mean, is it crappy? Yeah. I mean, it's certainly not going to be fun for anybody, and people are going to have to start doing things differently and in ways they're not used to doing it. But
absolutely. And practicing gratitude. I feel I don't see that enough right now with everything that's going on. It's very hard for people. People are very scared. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I get it. It's also affecting my family personally, my business personally. But the reality is, this is the reality, and as many of you know, I spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico after Maria, and they dealt with this for 9 months. They did not have power for 9 months. Imagine collaborating rides and daycares and all these things without electronics, without technology, without phones, for 9 months, spending every dollar you had to put gas in the generator just so you could wash your clothes or even have lights at night for a little while, or have your refrigerator turn on, for 9 months. So you did see a lot of people come together there, which is not social distancing, but there was a lot of social distancing going on because there just wasn't anything to do until businesses started to open back up. But they took a huge hit, they survived, and they were happy throughout it. Of course, there was a lot of suffering, but there was people coming together and celebrating what they still had versus crying about what they didn't. So I'm hoping to see a lot more of that here. I know my kids have been out on their bikes every day. I'm not worried about their homework. They are not going to lose out in life because they don't have the desk in front of them doing something. There's a lot of opportunity here for our kids to be kids again, to get outside and play. It's that time of year where it's kind of getting sunny and it feels good. And, but just practicing gratitude of all the things that we do really have at our fingertips versus what we don't because we have to be home.
I know. I mean, we've seen just outside of our house, I mean, people have been riding bikes and walking and running. And, it's kind of refreshing to see that. And you almost wonder, like, is this what people needed? Like, just, I mean, it sounds like really like a backwards way of thinking about it, but, it's a way to just be forced to slow down a bit and just think about, like I posted, I don't know if you saw my post on Facebook yesterday, but I mean, it was like a regular Sunday, but there was just kind of this weird thing about, I was grateful to be raking my lawn. I was grateful to have our, house smell of, home cooked meal and, Peter sleeping peacefully and just, we just were like, let's just have a beer outside. I mean, what else are you really going to do at this point? I think you just kind of had to make the best of it. And I know that again, I keep going back to there are people that are in some really crappy situations right now. And I hope we can help in whatever way we can and collectively pull each other together through all of this. But, it really kind of makes you appreciate the little things. And, the other memes that I'm loving are, I forgot the exact saying, but like, people have invented some pretty amazing things when they're forced to sit on their butts for a while. So
yeah.
I mean, you posted earlier. I mean, look, you started your business out of, your garage. I mean,
Yep. Absolutely.
Listen, there's opportunities in all of this. If you really look at it, I mean, what could you do differently? Maybe there's something you've always wanted to do and maybe this is your big shot. I don't know. You're going to be a little financially strapped pretty soon here, but
yeah. I mean, just it's true. How I started Unstoppable You was in the back corner of my garage, and I had zero investment. So if you really want to get creative and you really want to see where you can come back powerfully using the tools that are out there, I did it backwards. I started virtual, and then I went brick and mortar, but I still do virtual. So there's definitely lots to be done with time, free time, and we always complain we don't have it. Now we do. So what are we going to do with it? So.
It's all about mindset. I mean, like I said in the beginning with the whole Peter thing, I've said it a couple times, positivity and your mindset is what it's all about. I mean, I really believe that. I mean, we had doctors literally criticize us for like, why are you being so hot? This is not good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You've made that very clear. Thank you very much for confirming that.
Yeah.
But it's all about your mindset and you control how you feel. I mean, you really do. And, I've been guilty of it, especially lately. I've been so stressed out and so anxious. And for some reason, since we've been home, I'm like not stressed out at all. I mean, even though it's been very stressful, it's a different kind of stress. I think you just, you realize the freedoms we have, the freedoms you have to go to the grocery store and to go out to dinner and to do all these things. And all of a sudden we're being told, listen, hey, you shouldn't do those things.
Yeah.
Of course it's going to invoke some not great feelings, but in reality, we have these luxuries and I mean, we have those luxuries, not everybody has always been in that situation. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay. I don't know if any questions have been coming through. I see a lot of people have been on, but no questions. Okay. So great.
You want to know what kind of wine I'm drinking?
Yeah. Yeah, Megan, what kind of wine is it? Tell this pregnant mom over here what kind of freaking wine you're drinking. 'Cause I miss that.
It's grape juice, Heather. I'm sorry. It's grape juice.
It's having her communion over here. Just kidding. One of the things I like to do with all of my guests is to kind of just share a tidbit of advice that you've kind of learned in your experience, something quick to someone who may be in the shoes that you've once been in. Just to kind of sum up with some hope and the unstoppableness of that situation.
Sure. I guess I'll go back to the positivity thing. I mean, that was Ryan and I's biggest thing that we were pretty dogged about was staying positive. And just use your support system. I mean, nobody's in this alone. There's somebody there that will walk you through it and help you through it. And, I think you just have to be vigilant and understand, as much as you can about what's going on, educate yourself. And that goes for anything, right? That goes for, the NICU situation, that goes for what's going on right now. I think it's really, it's tough, but people are around you and we have a community, and whether that community is your family or your physical community or your friends, just appreciate people who are around you, try to have a positive outlook, and, people are all rooting for you. I had a boss that told me that once, like, nobody's looking for you to fail here. Everybody's rooting for you. So I think that's what you have to keep in mind. I don't think most humans look at each other and say, God, I hope that person fails. I mean, maybe, but
Yeah.
hopefully not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, but I think there's a community around that's willing to help. And again, whether that be the ladies that volunteered with me for March of Dimes, or whether that be helping people through business with the chamber. I mean, we just always want to be supportive. So
Sure. How can people support you and Peter and Ryan with the March of Dimes?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up today, because we actually got an email earlier that we are going to be canceling the walk for this year.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll reschedule, because, of course, especially with that community, we are very concerned about spreading of germs.
Sure.
Even though it was going to be in May, we still are going to postpone. So unfortunately, there's not a direct way that you can support. I'm not quite sure if the fundraising will still be up. You can always, of course, donate to March of Dimes, whether that be through our team. And I will find that out in the coming days to see if we're still going to actually do, fundraising without the walk. I think there's probably an option for that. But other ways that we would certainly appreciate, Kraus is undergoing a major NICU expansion right now. It will afford families the opportunity to have a little bit more privacy in the NICU. Their technology is going to be upgraded. So if you have, anything to spare, and I know, of course, it's a really tough time right now for everybody, but Kraus is a great organization to donate to. And they really are amazing. And they serve, a lot of people don't know this, but they serve many different counties, 13 counties in the area. So it's not just our area and just Syracuse. And a lot of babies go there from this area every year. It's kind of an astounding number. It's in the hundreds. So if you're looking for something local to support, I would recommend Kraus. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. And how old is Peter now?
He's 2.5.
And does he have a favorite word or something? Like, what's his favorite thing to do?
Boy, let's see. The phrase of the week is Peter no like it. He's like anything all of a sudden. I mean, pasta he used to love and devour. He just doesn't. Peter no like it. That's his big phrase, and he wants to walk around a lot. So while you're carrying him, I'm not sure what that's about either. But
yeah,
they pick little things to do. So that's his. That was his phrase all day today, walking around. Peter no like it.
Yeah.
Pick that one up.
He's super cute, Megan. It's been fun to watch him grow. So you guys are a family that I've been watching since he was born. So my heart was going out to you. I was a mom of a little boy at the time, and you know my story. And he was healthy as can be. And here was this perfect little family with this big struggle ahead. So I was keeping a close eye on you guys and really rooting you on without saying much. So,
well, we appreciate it. And that's why, we are just so thankful, not only our family, but the whole community really got behind us and followed our story. And we really are just, any opportunity we have to share it, we do, because at the time we were going through it, we knew nobody that had experienced this, except for a couple people, again, who were involved in March of Dimes. But it's tough to go through when you don't know someone. So that's why we like to share.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you for, I mean, it's not an easy thing to talk about. So I really do appreciate you sharing this inspiration. So,
anytime.
Yeah. So, thank you for everybody who tuned in tonight, on this episode of Unstoppable You with me, your host, Heather Beebe, where we have awesome stories with unstoppable people, unstoppable stories, unstoppable you right here on the D.
So you just bought your dream home, and now it's time to move. Let's face it, nobody likes to move. All the packing, unpacking, lifting, upstairs, downstairs, and broken everything, including your back. Let the professionals at EJA Moving Company take all the stress and pain out of your move. Competitively priced moving. relocation services, office moves, and complete packing and unpacking services. They work with everybody to make it simple and easy for you to move and relocate. Call EJA Moving Company at 315-335-0516. When it's time to relocate, have EJA Moving do all the work for you. Hit them up online, ejamoving.com.
Want to know what's going on at the D? Hit up disruptionnetwork.net and check out our events calendar. Find out about upcoming guests, special events, concerts, show schedules, community activities, and more. Get connected at disruptionnetwork.net.